Hello and welcome everyone to Genetics, Biology 326. This is a very exciting time to be studying genetics. We live in a society today where we're learning more and more about our genomes and about the genomes of organisms that surround us. Understanding genetics will help us in whatever profession we decide to go into, and it will also help us as citizens, because many of the things that we will encounter in society and at voting booths and as we talk with family and friends and peers will be enhanced by your knowledge of genetics. So before we start talking about genetics in great detail, let's kind of give a quick overview of how we're going to approach genetics this semester. In general terms, we're going to start with the molecule first, the DNA molecule. We'll talk a lot about this molecule. We'll talk about how we know it's the genetic material of life for most organisms. We'll talk about how it's constructed. We'll talk about rules that help regulate its shape and how the structures in it, the components of the DNA molecule will help us create specific traits through the process of making messenger RNA and proteins and other RNA molecules. As I said just a moment ago, will help develop traits, and I'm just going to draw a person here. So the traits that this makes this person or any organism is all because of the DNA and the environment. So we have traits here. And these traits, as I said, I'll repeat it real quick here, are the result of the DNA plus the environment. Now this process of going from DNA to traits, we can lump that up into one large category, which we'll call molecular genetics. The next thing we're going to be interested in is how are these traits from this organism, in this case a stick figure, how are they passed on to the next generation? So let's just draw smaller stick figures to indicate progeny that are produced. And so let's write inheritance here. How do we pass these traits on to the next generation? And we call this process here Mendelian genetics. Or sometimes we may call it transmission genetics. That is the rules that help govern how specific genes which encode traits are passed on to the next generation. Now over time, some of these traits are going to have certain advantages for that particular organism. Because even though I drew these all as one color, we know that over time, organisms that are produced, they will share many similarities to their parents, but they will also begin to look different as well. And this variation within this population is what allows for evolution to occur. And understanding these rules and understanding how certain traits can become more predominant in a population is what we call the branch of population genetics. So throughout this semester, we're going to begin talking about molecular genetics, and then we'll move into Mendelian or transmission genetics, talking about how traits are passed on, and then we'll begin to talk about how these traits and how they're inherited and how they generate variation and diversity within a population, how that can lead to evolution in the field of population genetics. I'm going to erase these top lines up here, letters I mean, and along the side here. And I want to remind you, while we're talking about all the rules and the regulations of genetics in these three branches of genetics, we're going to talk about it in context of a variety of life. So we'll talk about it in relation to bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes. We don't know as much about archaea, but we will touch on that when we can. We'll also talk about genetics in relation to evolution, disease and health, and how this all affects society. Now we need to spend a little bit of time talking about how the setup of this class will work and what you will need to do to be prepared and to succeed in this class. As with most classes, you'll have things that you need to do outside of class, and you'll have things that you need to do inside of class. So every day before class, or the night before class, you'll need to prepare for the next day. So let's write prepare. And you'll prepare in a few different ways. One, you'll have a reading assignment plus questions to answer. However, I find many of these textbooks to be a little difficult to read, particularly the first time you go through the material. So I'm going to provide you with two other tools. The first is what I call a note-taking guide. And I'll show you an example of this in a moment. But this will walk you through the reading assignments, help you pull out exactly what you need to know in order to be prepared for class. I will also provide you with podcasts, much like the one you're watching right now. And how you prepare for class, which of these things you use, or if you use all three of them, if you use just one of them, is really up to you. But this is my recommendation. I would recommend that you pull up your note-taking guide and then begin to watch the podcasts. As you're watching the podcasts, fill in the note-taking guides where you can. When the podcasts are over, if there's anything that you don't quite get or is not filled in with the note-taking guide, then go to your readings and see where you can fill in those gaps. You will then have some questions to answer related to that day's reading assignments to assess whether or not you're prepared for the class. So I encourage you to take advantage of these different tools that we'll go over in just a moment in a little bit more detail. Then in class, what we will do is first there will be a short assessment. It's a short quiz, multiple choice quiz, going over some of the basic stuff from your readings. But the most important thing that we're going to do in class is we're going to work together on problems. We will apply the key concepts for that day in our groups. These may come in the form of working on a particular case study. They may just be working out some more difficult problems that you may see again when the exams come around. I have found that if we can work through some of these problems together in class, that students typically will do much better on the exams. Then outside of class, there will be a short homework for each day to help you practice what you've learned. And then the cycle repeats itself where you prepare for the next day, and then we'll work on some problems and key concepts in class. Again, work on some homework on your own. Okay, now I would like to go over some of the tools that are available for you as you prepare for class and prepare for exams. This is your Blackboard page, and the first thing I'd like to show you are the note-taking guides. Every day will have their own note-taking guide. You'll see now they are up through day 5 in Blackboard. The rest will populate Blackboard soon. So let's click on day 1 note-taking guide. So all the note-taking guides will look very similar to this. The one for day 1 has a bigger description of what they are, and this won't be on all of them. But all of them will have this little disclaimer saying that anything listed here with an asterisk by it, you're responsible for, but it won't be on the next day's quiz. It will likely be on the exam and very likely to be part of the in-class activity the next day. Often these are tougher concepts that I think need a little bit more explanation in class. They'll be talked about on the podcasts, but maybe we need to pull them apart a little bit more in class. Under each day, there will be several objectives that break down what you need to know for that particular day in class. For day 1, we're going to go over our syllabus, and then we're going to go over parts of chapter 1. So let's not look at the syllabus. Let's just look at some of the objectives from chapter 1. And what you'll notice is that they're set up in such a way where the larger concept is placed in bold, and then a question or an explanation of what you need to know about that concept is here in italics. Sometimes I'll direct you to a specific figure, as you see here. Sometimes I'll say, as we see here, that the central dogma is something we're going to talk about throughout the semester, but for right now, this is what you need to know. So this kind of makes it pretty easy for you for this particular concept. I tell you what you need to do. I don't usually do that, but in this case, I did. Let's go ahead and look at genetics. It tells you what pages to look for it on, pages 3 through 6. And if you look on page 3, it gives a fairly standard definition of genetics. You can just type that right in here where it says define. Genetics is the branch of biology that deals with heredity and variation. So as I read the rest of that paragraph, I don't want to retype it all because really all I want is the simple definition. But you might look at that and say, well, this paragraph says that genetics is the unifying discipline of biology because it helps explain all of life. That's all I would put for that. Then you can go on to genes and traits. You know you're still between pages 3 and 6. So here, if you look that up, you'll see that a gene is a piece of DNA that is responsible for making a product, which would be either RNA or eventually protein. While traits are the characteristics of an organism coded for by the DNA. And that's all you need here. Sometimes as I watch students fill out these note-taking guides, they might put a little bit too much information here. Remember, this is to guide you through the readings. It's not so that you retype everything that you see in the textbook. Look at the paragraph that talks about genes and traits and try to summarize it in your own words. When you're done with any particular section here, this is where you might list a question that you don't quite understand, that you want to make sure you talk with somebody in class or talk with me so that we can get to the problems that you might be having with a particular concept. So you might put here, I don't understand the central dogma. So that reminds you to come back and ask for help on that concept. So let's talk about the summary here. I think it's a good idea to summarize what you see here with all these traits, with all these concepts that were explained under Objective 2. Summarize what you think are the most important. That'll help you synthesize in your mind these things and bring them together. None of this you have to do. This is all for your own help as you go through the reading so that you can prepare. It's not going to be graded, so it's all up to you. Another way you could approach this is that you could print this out and handwrite these in. Some people think handwriting is a better way to help you remember things. You could also just write these out on a notebook, piece of notebook paper as well. That's all I'm going to say about these note-taking guides for now. If you have any questions about them or suggestions, please let me know, and I'll be happy to help in any way I can. Next, let's look at the podcasts. So when you're ready to watch one of these, just go ahead and click on that particular day and that particular objective. As you're watching these podcasts, I would recommend taking out a blank piece of paper, and everything I draw or write on the podcast, I would recommend that you do the same. That's the best way to remember it. And then you're going to have it in your own notes on a piece of paper, and you won't have to access the podcast every time you want to review something. You'll have it there. And there's a lot to be said for handwriting your own notes. It will help you remember it much more effectively. I would also recommend having your note-taking guide handy. When a concept is discussed that's on your note-taking guide, go ahead and take that opportunity to fill out your note-taking guide. That way, when you're done with your note-taking guide, essentially what you have right there between your note-taking guides and the drawings you've made from the podcasts, you have what you need to know to study for the quizzes and the exams. The only extra thing you'll need for the exams are any of the activities we might do in class. All right, the next thing I want to show you is homework through Connect. If we click on, say, day 1 here, what you'll see are two things. The first is the Chapter 1 overview of genetics. This is through the reading. So if we click on this, as you're looking at this, you can see that you don't have to go to the Connect site through McGraw-Hill, the publisher of the book. You can access everything straight through your Blackboard shell, which is really convenient because it'll take you straight to the Smart Book here. When you first look at a particular chapter that's been assigned to you, you'll see this Preview tab. I would click on that, and it'll break down what's going to be discussed in that particular chapter. But really, the most important part is the read part. Well, it's two parts, the read and the practice part. Let's go to the first page of it. Up here, you can see you can move between the pages that are assigned in this chapter. So this is page 1, Overview Genetics. You'll see that some things are highlighted in yellow. What this book will do, will try to highlight the things that are the big picture concepts, the larger goals of the chapter. Doesn't mean you shouldn't read the other parts, and it doesn't mean that there will be a concept on the note-taking guide that is in this part that is not highlighted. So you may have to look for some things in there. They do a pretty good job at pulling out the most important parts, but it's not perfect. So you've already watched the note-taking guide, probably, at this point. And so you can skim through this and see if there's any concept that didn't make sense, reread some things to make sure that you understand it. And you'll notice that there's several things that are still highlighted in yellow. Now you'll see this is green. Well, this is green because I've already taken a part of the quiz at the end of this chapter. And when you have answered questions at the end of the chapter about concepts that were originally in yellow, they're going to make it green if you get those questions correct. This is intended to help you identify things that you've mastered as opposed to things you still need to work on. Again, always look at your note-taking guide as your guide as to decide whether or not certain things are discussed. All right, once you've read it and you feel pretty confident with the material, then you can go to practice. In practice, they're going to ask you several questions, which you then, of course, will answer. Let me answer a couple of them just to show you how this works. Which of the following cells are gametes? As you look through here, all the choices here, and we're going to put sperm. And we're going to say down here, how confident are you that you got that answer correctly? Well, let's say that we're pretty sure on this one, and we'll say, I know it. Oh, see, I made a mistake. I forgot that eggs and sperm were also both gametes. So I should have put that. And it tells me your answer is almost correct. So they're saying, I almost got it. All right, so good. Cells that, okay, what are somatic cells? Cells that unite at fertilization to restore diploid numbers of chromosomes. Cells that are not involved in sexual reproduction. Cells that give rise to sperm and egg. So let's click that one. We think that was right. But let's say we're not sure because these sound like they could also be correct. So you can go to the textbook here. Read about this. And it's going to open up this little tab that you can pull over here. And here we got our somatic cell. Most cells of the human body that are not directly involved in sexual reproduction contain 46 chromosomes. These cells are called somatic cells, in contrast to gametes, sperm, and egg cells. So now we're pretty confident that this is going to be the correct answer. So let's hit I know it. And we got that one correct. And as you go through these, they're going to see different kinds of questions. There will be some that are fill in the blank. There will be some that are matching, a whole variety of kinds of questions. When you're done with it and you're coming back, say in a couple days to look at it, you can hit this recharge button. It's not going to let me do it now because I haven't completed the assignment. But once I have completed the assignment, I can go back and use this recharge, and it'll give me different kinds of questions so I can practice again. Another thing I want to say about these SmartBook assignments is that these are completely optional. You don't have to do them. But if you do them, it will count as bonus points. If you do them all throughout the semester, you will get a 1% bonus, meaning at the end of the semester, I'll calculate your grade, and if you're sitting at an 89%, you'll get a B+. But if you did all of these assignments, you're going to get a 1% bonus, and you'll have a 90%, which is an A-. So it's worth doing, if nothing else, just for the bonus, but it's also useful to do because it helps you learn the material. Let's go back to Blackboard. Oh, one other thing about the SmartBook. These are always going to be due before class starts. So for day 1, this assignment is due at 10 a.m. on May 18th. The homework shown here, and I'll go ahead and open this up real quick. Again, I access it through Blackboard. I don't need to go through Connect. It's all through Blackboard. And I'm going to open this up here to preview it. So yours is going to look a little different than what I see as the instructor, but you'll see the question here, and then there will be an answer that you click on. This being the instructor view, we can see that it tells me what the correct answer is. So morphological, physiological, and behavioral differences in individuals within the same species may be attributes to differences in the gene sequence of some individuals. Okay, so that's the correct answer. Something to say about the homeworks here. These will be made available at 12 noon, right at the end of class of each day they're associated with. So day 1, these will be made available on May 18th at 12 noon. They will be due, in most cases, the following Sunday. So that you have a whole week to kind of decide how you want to budget your time in doing these homework assignments. You'll want to look at the due dates, because in some cases the due dates aren't on Sunday. For instance, if that material is necessary for an exam that is the following day, then the due date will be a little sooner. So always look at the due dates. But in most cases, they will be due that Sunday. Okay, let's go back to Blackboard. Okay, I think that covers everything that you'll need to know in order to access the material that you need to access to be ready for class and for quizzes and exams. If you have any questions at all, please make sure you contact me, and I'll help in any way I can. All right, I'll see you in class. Bye.